Last week we kind of continued our just kind of talking about Martha and Mary and Lazarus. 2 weeks ago we talked about Martha and Mary, and Martha being distracted with service. So distracted with service that she, or I should say, so distracted in serving Jesus that she kind of missed out on Jesus. And then brought to a place where she demanded of Jesus that Jesus tell her sister that her sister should do the same thing that she's doing. And just kind of the twisted mentality when we substitute relationship with Christ for service. Is ministry important? Sure, it's important, right? But that's not what salvation is for per se. It's to know Christ, right? To have a relationship with Christ, and the ministry flow out of that. Mary, he says, chose the good place, and she sat at his feet, and he said that will not be taken away from her. And so then in John chapter 11, a different time in their lives where Jesus is with his disciples, and back in Bethany, Lazarus gets sick. And so Mary and Martha send a messenger to Jesus, and they tell him, hey, Lazarus, whom you love, is how they describe him, is sick. And it's very counterintuitive, because Jesus' response is, I am not going to go right now. So the messenger comes, he's sick, he tells the disciples, we're not going to go. He waits 2 days. He tells them exactly why he waited 2 days. He waited 2 days so that Lazarus would die, which is not the medical care we typically look for, right? It is very counterintuitive to what would be ministerial. It seems like, no, you should have gone. What are you doing? And he says, the reason I'm not going to go is so that you guys can see. He says, I'm glad I wasn't there when he died, so that you guys can see the glory of God. And really, a very tremendous, we read the section in a couple of minutes, right? So we read from the beginning to the end in a couple of minutes, but those ladies suffered for, not to mention Lazarus suffering for at least 6 days, time-wise, if you look at the timeline. They had to wrap their brother up after he died and put him in a tomb and have a memorial and go through that isolation, the difficulty, especially in a truly patriarchal society, not negative patriarchal, but the idea of a father being a protector and a provider, and then after him, a brother. They were not married women, or they would have lived with their husbands, so they don't have spouses, they're living with their brother, and now the patriarch of their family is dead. And we can scoff at that or whatever, but the reality is it would have had pretty profound consequences in that society. So they had to go through that. They had to go through worrying what's going to happen to us, how is this going to work, the difficulty of losing the loved one, just a lot. And you and I both know that in intense times of stress and difficulty, 4 to 6 days is a very long time, isn't it? It's a very long time. And these ladies suffer through that so that other people ultimately can see God's glory. Remember the word glory. This is important for all. It really means the same in Hebrew. It can add weightiness as a definition also, as it is in Greek, which is, again, it's doxa, where we get our word doxology, and it's good opinion. The word glory literally means good opinion. So when he says that we'll see the Father's glory, or the Father has glorified the Son, the idea there isn't that like he made him shiny or bright or something like that. It's the idea to look upon him, and an awe develops because of a realization or revelation of how good he is. Does that make sense? So he says that this death, this incident, is going to create a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty. But that will end up in people seeing how good God is. And this can be a difficult shift in our, really kind of our perspective and in our world view. Many of us, all of us, really, I think from the beginning, we tend to interpret all information or events in a primary sense of how will this affect me, right? And so when we go through a tremendous amount of suffering, it's a shift, it's a paradigm or mind shift to think, okay, this affects me negatively in my emotional and feeling, but can God get good opinion for this? And am I willing to go through suffering so that God can get good opinion? Because realistically, in an eternal fashion or ideology, the best thing that can happen in this temporal world is for other people, us included in that, but for people to see who God really is, right? In a world where Jesus gets a lot of bad press, a lot of accusations, I'm sure we've all heard, what about the Crusades? These type of things, which just as a side note, the Crusades were actually pretty awesome. Let me just throw that out there. And here's why. Because there was a religious war going on that had made it all the way to Italy. And so the Crusades stopped that, or all of Europe would be speaking Arabic right now. So when people want to, do we condone everything that happened in the Crusades? Absolutely not. But this kind of like worldly ideology that somehow the Crusades were this big evil thing, no, it was met in response to Jews and Christians being slaughtered by the millions. And they cried out, basically, and that's why they came down there. So just to throw that out there, not to make a bone to pick or something like that, but all that to say is that, I don't even remember where I went off on that, and I forgot what it was. But so, let's be Crusaders. No, not saying that. But, so the bottom line is that what's being instilled here, or the lessons that we're learning about here and what they're talking about, is the whole time Jesus has this in control. He understands what's going to happen. He understands that there will be pain and there will be hurt. And it even notes in there that he loves them. It says he loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. He loved them. It wasn't apathy that led him, that he was willing to let this happen, this difficulty. It was primarily and expressly so that everybody could see in that area who his Father is, God the Father. And that's the perspective that we're going from, I should say.